Based on Kuzio 2017, the conflict starts during 1919s when Russia coming to terms with both Ukrainian independence and Kiev sovereignty over the Crimea and Sevastopol. These two executives took 2 years to sign a treaty. After that, on 1997 until 1999, the parliaments ratified it, and the next 5 years until 2003 for the border to be delimited. Firstly, the Azov Sea and Kerch Straits was refused by Russia to be continued, and it caused both areas adjoining the Crimea. Next, Russia still want to refuse to demarcate any parts of its border with Ukraine. Lastly, Russia had applied pressure to be extend its 20 years lease on the 3 Sevastopol naval bases beyond 2017 so that they become permanent forward military base. The Ukraine conflict or crisis is a power struggle faction within Ukraine. One of them intended to be aligned with European Union and the other with Russia. Ukraine seen as an important nation as it one of the contributors to the economic and of the Soviet Unions. In 2014, Russian defended itself and said that it was protecting their port access to the Black Sea right after the Russian special forces occupied Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula, in which such incident then became a current crisis among these two nations. In addition to that, the act of Ukrainian will cause massive loss to Russia, which is the plan to develop natural gas reserves of Crimea as they have partnership with United States companies.
Next is, why did we choose realism theory? Realism is one of the key perspectives in the study of international relations. Realism is regarded as a perspective on international politics that emphasizes on conflict and competition. This perspective believes that world politics run with the international system of anarchy of sovereignty states, where no sovereignty exists. All kinds of political activities focus on power purpose, power tools, and the exercise of power. Thus, international politics is described as a power politics. In addition, realism also believes that there is no international obligation on moral between independent countries. According to Machiavelli, one of the realists considers that the highest political value is the national liberty, independence. The country must be responsible for its survival and national stability, as no other country will be willing to help if it is having a hard time. If anything, then it is being confirmed that there is a purpose behind the help provided. Therefore, every country should strive to gain the advantage and defend the interests of its country and ensure its survival. In the realist view, national interest has a special meaning as a strategic force, where realists conceptualize national interest as a permanent condition that provides policymakers with a rational guide to action. The country must therefore be able to ensure that there is a real balance of international power in the international system. In this case, Russia saw the takeover of the Crimea as a form of rationality in its national interest. It is a Russian military base that has existed since the time of the Soviet Union, and after the collapse, Russia had to rent it to Ukraine. Realism maintains the view that pursuit of national power and security is the dominant logic in global politics. Unsurprisingly, in view of the ongoing security crisis between Russia and Ukraine, the realists can say what Russia did by appealing to the Crimea is one of the ways in which Russia seeks to gain power. The incident could also be seen as a response from Ukraine to the Russian military threat that it will also seek to take over the country's sovereignty. The realist perspective also emphasized on concept of power. The Ukrainian response was also demanded to withstand Russian military power.
So as we all know, that principle of realism has many beliefs. They see international structure as anarchy because they believe that there is no power that can maintain an order. For realist countries, they believe that the most important factors in international relation is power and also military strength. There are several main arguments of realism in the conflict of Russia and Ukraine. So the first one is strength. So we noted that Russia's and their president leadership mostly use realism theory all the time. John Mearsheimer, a prominent realist figure, stated that the developmental of the conflict is because the enlargement of North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is NATO, which planned to move Ukraine out of Russia's influence and move it to the Western influence. John Mearsheimer also stated that there are three main causes of the conflict, which is NATO enlargement, European Union expansion, and also democracy promotion. Interestingly, Russia's President Vladimir Putin stated that Russian actions toward Crimea is because that they believe if they do not take action first, then NATO will try to influence the region. The next argument is opportunities. Power and security are some of the characteristics of realist theory. By taking Crimea, Russia can gain more economic and also geopolitical benefits. Crimea is a strategically important location for Russia for their military activities. Its position in the region helped Russia win the war with Georgia in 2008, and the location is very crucial for Russia for its economic activities and security interests in the area. For example, Russia used the Black Sea to supply Syria's President Bashar Assad with military equipment during the Syrian civil war.
Realism also could be looked or related to egoism of selfishness of a person for their own interests. Human nature has not changed since the day of classical antiquity by Thomson, where realists believe it is a main nature in their core to be egoistic. As we can see, Russia is one of the world's superpowers other than China and US, where Russia fully aware that their intervention in the Ukraine internal conflict will not harming them, even sanctions will be imposed upon them. And no other country in the world currently will take the risk to take a full-scale war with Russia that consequently will start a World War III. Basically, Russia is confident other than being condemned by the action in Ukraine, other people or country will not do more than that. We also see the turmoil in the European Union itself. The exit of United Kingdom or Brexit other than want to be self-governing on their own country. The British also argue that the centralized government body of the EU is started to strengthen their military presence in the international level, despite already have NATO and EU military staff. EU also want to centralize their military power, and most of the EU community argument on that matter is being reflected toward the action of Russia in Crimea. That basically that they could not do anything about it without strong military power, but it will also go against the very foundation of the establishment of the EU itself. In defensive realism theory, realists said that their only aim is to get appropriate amount of power by walls, to maintain the existing power and to prevent trigger of counterbalancing coalition against them, or in this case Russia. Russia did not want any influence from any EU or NATO present in their doorstep, that is Ukraine, that could challenge their military presence in that region. Russia had the opportunity to intervene, and the condition is ideal for them, either in military power and the socio-economic, especially in part of the Crimean society that is more on pro-Russia.
The relationship between Ukraine and Russia are quite cooperative at first. However, since both have been through a period of tension, the relation became more complicated. The first lesson learned is based on the conflict of Ukraine pro-Russia president in refusal to sign an agreement with European Union has made the Ukrainian citizen ignited a mass protest and objection towards this action. In my opinion, the lesson that I learned from this conflict is, as a president, he needs to make sure that every decision he takes must make sense to the citizen. As a president, he should be able to deliver what the citizen needs instead of focusing on his own goals. However, the protest met a winning result by toppling the government, which then made the president exit the country. Next, the president should not trust other countries rather than its own people. This is because the support from Russia has not lasted longer, and after a few months, Russia began to invade Ukraine and tend to support the rebels. Other than that, lesson that I learned from the conflict is if Ukraine and Russia are able to maintain their relationship, it will give benefit to both. But since both were focusing on power struggle and state survival, their relationship become more complicated. For example, like the conflicts of Crimea. In my opinion, any IR theory that can reduce the tension between Ukraine and Russia is liberalism. This is because this theory is contrary to realism. The actor in realism is focused more on being positive rather than being pessimistic. Other than that, there is a judgment saying that IR can be cooperative rather than conflictual. So, by being cooperative to one another, it will reduce the tension to both countries.
Apart from Ukraine and Russia themselves, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, European Union, EU, United States, US, United Nations, International Court of Justice, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, known as Trilateral Contact Group, together with Russian proxy authorities. International grouping known as Normandy format, which consists of France, Germany, Russia, and Ukraine, and the Crimean faction are the parties involved in the conflict of Ukraine and Russia. The NATO was involved because of enlargement, which planned to move Ukraine out of Russia influence and absorb Ukraine to the west. In fact, some Crimeans are also intended to rejoin Russia and others from Ukraine. The US and EU were involved because of the economic sanction were imposed by them to punish Moscow for such act, although there is no sign that Crimea will return to Ukraine. A draft was analyzed by UN in which that is because the UN were involved in such conflict of Russia and Ukraine, and prior to 2014, the Russia-Ukraine relationship already saw often in the choppiness with argument regarding Ukraine connection to NATO and the EU. The status of Russia, Crimea, Black Sea Armada, and the travel of Russian flammable gases, which is the natural gases by means of Ukraine to Europe. OSCE and Normandy fall involved in such conflict because they did participate in a resolution of conflict along with Ukraine and Russia, which namely as Minsk Agreement, whereby it was signed by them in 2014 and 2015. Although such agreement failed to end fighting, and the second meeting then conducted in 2015. The International Court of Justice involved because they ruled that it has jurisdiction to hear a case Ukraine filed in 2017 against Russia for its action in Crimea and eastern Ukraine.